and welcome back to the Book and Life podcast. Today we're going to have a brand new book guest on. Whether they're an author, an editor, a producer, you'll never quite know, so you're in for one hell of a ride. But today I just have to do the adverts and then I'll get us straight into that most important conversation. And as we do every week, I'm going to read The Shadow, which is part of the Time Guardian series, and this is book 4 from Marianne Curley. The battle is over, the war is won. The prophecy complete, but life can't just pick up where it left off for Ethan, struggling to cope with tragic loss. At odds with friends in the guard, he finds himself adrift, jumping in shadows and sensing someone who can't possibly be there. Blaming herself for the goddess Athena's death, Giselle swears revenge, to vilify the Immortals' plan for world domination. But Giselle hadn't planned on love, and that leaves her with an unbearable choice. Should she follow her heart, or the strings of a goddess short on praise but high on expectation, who continues to pull her from the grave? As the Guard and the Order battle through the past and into an impossible future, darkness lurks round every corner. The fight for the world's survival rests with just one. Is it friend or foe who stands in the shadow? And just a reminder that The Price of Freedom by Rosemary Rowan, is being donated to the Ukraine refugee crisis. And here's the blurb for her book. It's one of her Roman British crime series, which was written under her maiden name. All editions can be found online where all books are sold, even her agents donating her commission. Sorry, I don't have the blurb for that, but that's what she's doing. And now, without further ado, let's get you to the guests. And welcome back to the Book and Life podcast, guys. Today we've got an amazing author coming on, and she's got some incredible stuff to tell you. I could not be more delighted to have her here. So without further ado, everybody, please welcome Elizabeth.
Hello, hi, nice to be here, Crystal.
So tell us about your latest novel.
Okay, so my latest novel is called The Promise Tree. And it's the second title I've written as Elizabeth J. Hobbes. All my other books have been written as Elizabeth Hobbes. But this one has elements of fantasy, mythology, sort of folklore in it. So the J is there to distinguish that from my other writing. And the Promise Tree is set in a mill town in the north of England, which is where I've ended up living. And it starts off in Edwardian Britain, and it starts with a little boy called Edwin who goes off on his grandfather's land, and he climbs up a sycamore tree. He pushes his way through sort of the hedge surrounding it and climbs up the tree to try get a leaf to prove to his friend that he's climbed it. And while he's there, he meets a little girl who's already in the tree. He falls out and breaks his arm, and he's forbidden from going back. But he goes back a few weeks later, meets the little girl again, and as a result, he's then banished from his grandfather's house to go live with relatives in Yorkshire. And then he returns when he's 21 with only vague memories of the tree, the little girl, and what he'd been doing there. And then he meets the girl again, and there is something strange about her that at first he doesn't believe, and she tells him that she's the spirit of the tree. So it's Edwin's sort of journey to realising whether she's telling the truth or not, as well as the romance between him and this girl, who he names Drusilla. So it's their romance over decades, actually, but it's sort of mainly around the early decades of the 20th century.
Wow. That is fun. I love that idea, and there's sort of that magicalness to it that I think a lot of readers and listeners for this podcast will be going, I gotta go check that one out. I definitely will be putting my name down on the list for that one. But what was your aha moment for this one? What was your moment where you're like, I gotta write this story?
So I think this one, after my first romantasy, which is a phrase that I've come across recently, romantic fantasy, which I love. My first
Yeah.
one was set in Yorkshire, and it was based around the mythology of Selkies. So the woman in the heroine in that was, so my cat has just come in and is clawing my legs because he's so rude, and he just basically sits and digs his
Oh,
claws
don't
into
worry
me.
about it. Mine
Um,
do the same.
yeah,
you're you're
um,
you're in you're in cat, good cat company.
yeah, no,
If
no,
mine
no
doesn't
chance to get on with
spring
it.
on me.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
right, I'll put him away. Yeah, so my first book was based around the idea of Selkies, who are the seal people in sort of Scottish
Well,
mythology
yeah.
and folk tales, and it got me thinking, well, what other folk tales and other creatures might there be out there? Because we have lots of stories in our culture and others as well. And I remember talking to a friend and saying, oh yeah, what if there are centaurs, but they're actually Shetland ponies or things like that. And
Yeah.
it got me thinking, well, what other mythological creatures are there? And then I was thinking about dryads, which are the sort of spirits of, well, originally it was oak trees, but I think people generally think of them as being sort of olive trees and associate them with Greek mythology.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, where would a dryad live in the UK, and what sort of tree? And as I say, so this the town and the park where the book is set is very heavily based on where I live now. And we've got
Yeah.
a lovely park within about 10 minutes walk where I go to walk my dogs. And it's full of really old sycamore trees. And I just thought how wonderful it would be if there was actually a spirit of the tree living in the sort of trees that we're surrounded with. And that got me thinking, well, who would she be? What would she be? And, what would her connection be as a kind of an ancient spirit, to sort
Hmm.
of bring her into the modern world? And I think it was that really where I started thinking, actually, yes, she'd obviously have to meet somebody from the present day. Um, but obviously, writing historical, I knew that the present day wasn't going to be our day. So, um,
Yeah.
and then I just had this idea of people picnicking, and the book opens on the day that Edward VII was crowned king.
Oh, I
Um,
like that. That
so,
that's such a memorable moment too. Yeah.
yeah, so Edwin's out with his friends, and he sneaks off to go climb the tree, and basically ends up falling out, breaking his arm, and ruining the whole family party.
Of
Um,
course. Yeah.
so it
As
kind of went
kids
on from
do.
there, and then and it kind of grew. I always start off saying, "Oh yes, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to going to plot it all out," and then of course things happen, and I end up changing things, and a lot more happens than I'm expecting to. Um, so originally Edwin is an orphan, but as I started writing, I started realizing that there was more to his parents' death than he realized, and this then built into the fact that he's got quite a damaged relationship with his grandfather. And so what led to that? So things kind of evolved out of that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Um, so yeah, so it kind of all evolved in itself.
I think that's such a good story, and it's like a good aha moment to have.
Mm.
For like me, when you said Selkies, I smiled because I grew up in Scotland, in Shetland, where we did the Selkie play about,
Right.
what it was like to be a Selkie or a teenage Selkie girl. And I thought that was just amazing, and it's one of the bases of my fantasy work is that idea too. And I think the law of Scotland is such a great inspiration for all writers all over the world because we have
Mm.
such deep rooted storytelling, I think, in
Yeah.
our DNA and in our blood that I just love how that pours out of everybody. So where do you like what's the next project that everyone can be really excited about?
So the next one after this is it's a gender swapped retelling of My Fair Lady,
Oh,
um,
okay.
which is currently titled My Fair Lord, um,
I
and
like that. Yeah.
that will be out in late February 2024. So a little while to go.
That
I've
sounds
seen the front cover of
amazing.
it, and it's amazing. Um, so I'm
That's
getting
as I
excited
always
about
say
that.
that that's the best moment because you're like, oh, all that hours of like tears and
Yeah.
straining myself and clawing my hair out was actually worth it. Like it's happening, it's real, it's there. It's like
Yes,
I can see it,
I
I
know
can touch
exactly.
it. It's
Yeah, it's like,
you know,
yeah, I've actually got a book, and then you see the pictures and think, yeah, brilliant, and Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
that
the
one.
best moment possible. Yeah, even I admit that. Like when I get my books, I've been doing this 15 years now.
Mm,
And that moment where I touch it and I'm like, oh my God, it's real. Like you don't get the same feeling with ebooks, but when you're an author and you pick it
yeah,
up and you're like, and
yeah.
you just start doing this, and yeah, I
Yeah,
love
I got a
that.
box actually. I'm just recovering from COVID. I had tested positive
Oh,
2 weeks ago,
yeah,
and while I was actually off work because I teach as well, so I was off work for
yeah.
the whole week. And a box of my author copies of The Promise Tree arrived, and it was so yay! It's just so lovely to
Dear
have them
God,
there
yeah,
physically. Yeah, and
yeah.
I,
It
I,
does.
I don't know
That's
about you, but
true.
I still get the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I do
Um,
too. Yep,
yeah,
it is. It never goes away. The
yeah,
imposter syndrome is like literally sticks with you, and you just have to kind of be like, yeah, no. Like you kind of have to almost undo that negative way of
mm,
thinking, and that's that stupidity that you end up in your head where you're like,
yeah.
So
It's
yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, it's really hard though, isn't it? And I think
It is.
especially, I don't know about you, but because I have another job as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
for 3 days a week, I'm in school, I'm teaching, I'm there doing that job. So then coming home and writing, um, which of course is very solitary, it feels very odd. So it almost doesn't feel real. And I think possibly, because you have the lag where it takes, 7 or 8 months to write a book, and then obviously there's the revisions and everything before you even before you get the sign off. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's very weird, sort of actually thinking, yes, this is really happening. This is actually me as well. Um,
Yeah, I get that
but,
feeling like when I sit down and I'm like, okay, I need to go through like this mountain of stuff, this mountain of emails, and I need to figure out what am I doing here.
yeah,
Yeah, and I've always felt that way. Like I've always felt, and then when I go do the author talks, and you're sitting there with these people, and you're talking about the book and your journey and everything, and you're like, oh, I actually have made it. This is what it feels like. I mean, you don't think of that when you're sitting at your computer and you're going, what would that character do? Like, what would this person do? What would that person do?
yeah,
And you have to try and figure it out yourself, or you end up going to your friends and you say, can't figure this out. Help, you know. And that's the very frustrating part for me
yeah,
is the not being able to figure stuff out. I just want to pull my hair out completely. And I
yeah,
think that's the downside of being an author is that we are solitary because we have to have really tight focus on what we're doing.
mm,
And we have to know where we're going with everything. And there's a kind of almost like an organizational discipline and persistence elements to it. And I know that I mentioned this in a lot of podcasts, but if you don't have those three elements, you never get anything done.
yeah,
And it's like an endless cycle of trying to get through. And I think that's also really important
yeah.
to understand that too. So, what would you say has been the most exciting kind of a part of this journey for you so far? What's the bit that you just like? This is the moment that I thought, wow,
I think for me, with Daughter of the Sea, the Selkie book, it was shortlisted for the RNA, the Romantic Novelists Association. It was shortlisted for Fantasy Romance of the Year in do you know? I can't remember what year it was. All the years have gone. I found that since COVID, I can't even remember. How long
yeah, I
ago
get
things
this
were.
that way too. Yep,
So not
yep, I
last
get that
year,
way
the
too.
year before. It must have been 21, maybe 2020, 21. And it
Yeah,
was shortlisted. Which was amazing, and obviously I knew ahead of time, so I had to go to my head teacher and say, "Look, I'm going to need an afternoon off work so I could go to the awards ceremony in London."
yeah,
And that was great. And I think, that went a long way to sort of alleviating some of the imposter syndrome.
yeah.
Actually sitting there, in the hotel with other writers, lots of writers that I've read as well, and thinking, oh my God, it's so and so. And I didn't win, but it kind of didn't matter. The fact that I got that far was just amazing.
The
Um,
nomination means more than sometimes winning it does. At least
yeah, and
that, in
just
my opinion. Yeah.
yeah, just getting to be there and think, yes, actually, I can hold my own in these circles, which was really good. So that was great.
Yeah, there's almost that feeling when you first go to the conferences. You're like, oh
Yeah,
shit, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then you kind of like, you try to pretend that you know what you're doing. And
yeah,
then what you slowly realize is that all of us is doing the same thing. We're
yeah,
all of us like socially in debt because we haven't done it for so long. and we're all socially going,
Yeah.
am I doing this right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And that goes on and on until you eventually get to the part where you're comfortable.
Yeah. I hope I will one day. I haven't been to the
It does come.
conferences.
It does come. When you've had that really
Yeah.
awesome dinner and that round table
Mm.
and you kind of have that chat, then yeah, it kind of just slows everything down and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
It
usually because I mean this year it was in the summer holidays and I was away.
yeah.
But usually it's about 2 weeks before the end of term, and I'm absolutely
Mhm.
shattered.
Mhm.
Because teaching is such a full on job. I teach year one as well, so they're 5 and 6 year
Oh,
olds.
yeah.
So usually the last 2 weeks of July, I'm dead on my feet. So a couple of times I've actually gone down on the Friday night, stayed in the hotel near the conference rather than going straight to it, and
Yeah.
just slept, and then turned up on the Saturday morning a bit more awake.
You
Um,
have to. You have
yeah,
to. And it's also the traveling part too. Like that's the
mm,
part that everybody doesn't realize wears you out. Like 'cause
yeah,
it's the physical traveling to it.
mm,
Setting your stuff down, realizing, all right, have I got everything? What do I need? What do I need to do? Where
yeah,
am I needed? What's my schedule? What's my itinerary? And then from there, that all adds on to the tiredness. Never
mm,
mind the fact that you're a teacher or the fact that you've been working with 5-year-olds. I was a learning support teacher, and I used to come in and I'd be like, and then I'd
yeah,
have a 2-hour nap, and then I'd be like, yes, okay, I can write. I gotta go.
yeah. Can do it.
And then I
Yeah,
just charge straight in. But
mm,
see, because I was in primary school as a learning support teacher, and if
yeah,
I did not have that 2-hour nap when I got in, I was just awful for the rest of the day. I was like, oh,
yeah,
um, but it was so worth it just having that interaction with kids and almost kind of keeping up with them because they
yeah,
change so quickly and what's the phase and everything else changes so quickly, and I
mm,
feel like it improved me as a writer by
yeah,
doing that learning support job and having that connection with kids.
yeah,
um and I think that's super important if you are doing fantasy that's aimed at YA or aimed at that kind of, because most people who pick up YA are just kids that haven't really grown up as
mm,
well. Like they're just looking for that magic in the world. And I think that's where sometimes being around kids actually helps you be ahead of everybody because you've got that magic already there.
yeah.
Because kids are infectious with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm quite lucky because my own kids, I mean, my daughter is such a huge reader. She's 16 and a half now. So she's introduced me to a lot of YA books. Um,
Yeah.
and, I'm sure she reads a lot of stuff. She's never read any of mine. I keep saying, pick one up, it's all right. But I think there's that kind of, too close. But yeah, she
Yeah.
introduces me to a lot of authors as well in the YA areas. So,
And you
that's really
probably get
nice
a
from my
list
point of
of
view.
like, yeah, you
Yeah.
get a list probably every time you go to the romance convention of, can I get autographs from
Yeah.
this, and this author, please? Like the long shopping list, and you're like, I'm going to need 2 suitcases to come back.
Yes. Yeah.
2 extra suitcases here.
Yeah.
Like I always think that's funny because whenever I go to book signings and book tours, I always come back with a book, and
Mm.
Puppy looks at me and he's like, we have 700 books in this house. You usually want another one?
Yeah. I got
And
her.
I'm like,
I managed when it was her 15th birthday, I think. I don't know
yeah,
if you've come across a series called Ink.
yes, yeah, I have,
Yes,
yeah.
and I think the third one was just released just before her birthday. And I messaged the author on Twitter, and I managed to get her a signed copy
Oh
with her
wow,
name in it,
yeah.
and I was like, oh yes, big brownie points for that one. So that
Yeah,
was good. It's like, oh
definitely,
yes,
because
some advantages to doing this.
to be, yeah, because I
Yeah.
mean, I must admit, like when I collect, so if I love an author's work, I'll collect as much of their work
Mm.
as I can. And then what I do is I either make sure that I'm there for a signing that they're going to be doing, or I like message them and say, if I send all of these copies to you, will you sign them and send them back to
Yeah.
me? I'll pay for the shipping. And most of them are really, really good, and they'll be like, yeah, of course. And
Yeah.
and that to me is like the upside to this job in a way, because there's a lot of downsides to doing this work, I think.
Mm.
But having that, I always think is a really good upside.
Yeah.
So
I think so, and I think yeah.
what's the best book you've read this year? What's the one book that you can think of that you're like, everybody needs to check this out?
Okay, it was one, and actually I keep telling all my family and friends. It's by a woman called Barbara Kingsolver, and it's called Demon
Oh, okay.
Copperhead. And basically,
Yeah.
it's a retelling of David Copperfield,
Oh,
set
okay.
in the
Yeah.
Appalachian Mountains in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, I'm guessing. And it's just so clever because, I mean, I don't know if you know David Copperfield at all,
I do.
but
Yeah.
it's one of the ones that is not one I'm massively familiar with, although I did see the film. There was a really good film version, came out a couple of years ago. Um,
Hmm.
but you know, it starts off it, and she manages to take all the characters, all the situations, and put them so convincingly into this other landscape of this whole other culture. But
Yeah.
the themes are the same, you know, because you're talking about a very poor area. You know, a lot of sort of, you know, drug use, people in real sort of, you know, economic straits, and there's obviously all the stuff about, you know, the families and his mother
Yeah.
remarrying and things. So, and it was so well written. We went to France and Spain. We've got a small caravan, and we went to France and Spain
Hmm.
over August. And I just remember
Yeah.
sitting there, dry, you know, in the campsite, ignoring the family. You know, they'd all be going off for a swim, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to finish this one. But it was the world was so convincingly created.
Yeah.
And there were bits as well that, you know, I'd known from the story that I knew they were obviously coming up, and I wasn't quite sure how she was going to do it. And then it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, of course, that's such a clever way of doing it. So I really like the way people take something well known and then sort of put a twist on it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And I think
yeah.
that's the thing. Like, world creation is so, so important
Mm,
that you can't create a world unless you do that. Like, when I did Marie's World, I took the idea of, well, what would it be like if I took every one of these main characters and gave them a book from their perspective? And they
mm,
have their almost like their own little series where we build up their stories. So it all of them intertwine. So if you kind of always think of it like a spider web.
yeah.
And most adventurous idea I've ever had because I agreed to do 64 books in that one series. And I'm still
64.
working.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm still working through it. I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere, like, but this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
And for me, just trying to figure that point forward, sometimes
Mm,
I have to kind of go back and look at notes and think world creation,
yeah.
plot, and then the characters. You have to know how to balance all three. And that's like super important. And I think that's something for writers. If you're listening, you might be strong in one area and you might not be as strong in another area, but work on the area you're not as strong in, because really good storytelling is about getting all three elements to work
Mm,
together. It is a jigsaw puzzle and it is a nightmare to wriggle all of them together.
yeah.
But it is worth it, because when you finish at the end of the day, you can go, aha, this is perfect. I've got this. And it's worthwhile. I think that to me is something that I always give that advice to when it comes to authors and it comes to different people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think keeping the notes as well, because I mean, one of my things is losing track of time and ages and years and things like that, and what season it is. So you know, the idea of doing it with that many interlinked characters just blows my mind. Actually,
Yeah, I
you know,
mean, I of course I had twins in my series.
right?
So they're twin sisters and they turn on each other. And one of
Mm,
them publishes one twin's diaries to the world, and the other one is kind of like, what the hell just happened to me? I'm
yeah,
already famous. I'm already dealing with that mess. Now you've just put my diaries out there. Like, there's no secrets anymore. There's nowhere to hide. And that was the initial concept of the drama that I wanted to build
mm,
moving forward. And I'm still learning that. Like, I'm still piecing the little pieces together. I'm 6 or 7 books in. Thank
yeah,
God I have a co-writer. If Joe, if you're listening to this, I love you. You're totally saving my butt half of the time, because he'll read my stuff. I do the majority of the writing, and then he
mm,
reads it and he comes back and he went, "You went off the cliff like 20 pages ago. Come back here."
yeah,
And it's just, you can almost imagine him grabbing the back of my jumper and pulling me back to the point I was supposed to be at, dropping
mm,
me and saying, right, go straight ahead, but don't go off the next cliff.
yeah.
Like, he's almost like that guiding spirit that keeps like reining me back in. And bless him, like, he just retired from wrestling. He does acting and he does all these other things.
Uh,
And so the fact that he's stuck around for 13 years working on this series with me,
That is
And
pretty good.
yeah, and I'm like, sometimes I really feel sorry for him because it's been such a long journey. But yeah, I think, and for me, jumping between genres is literally just building different worlds, and
Mm.
I love creating that feeling. I love bringing magic together and pulling it all together, and seeing where it goes. I think is also the fun of it too. So I love that that's something that you would do, and I definitely will be putting your book out there. I think it's an incredible read. I know my mother would absolutely adore it.
Oh, good.
And I'm getting ready to celebrate her 60th birthday this weekend. So,
Yeah.
as always, madness in this house. But yeah, like that's the thing. What's your thing to do to balance out your writing life and your normal life? Like, how do you balance that on a day-to-day basis?
I think because because of the teaching, there are 3 days where I really can't think of much else. Although having said that, I've got voice to text app, so as I'm driving to
Ah,
work, I've got about a 30-minute drive to work. I'll often put it on and dictate scenes, and
mhm.
then email them to myself, and copy it into the text, just to get ideas down. But I think
Yeah,
because I'm so full on at work, I don't really have the chance to think about the writing time. Um, what I do have to be very conscious of is making sure that I'm not spending the days when I'm writing doing other stuff.
yeah,
Because I know I'm very, very lucky that I can have a couple of days a week to dedicate to writing, but it's very
yep,
easy for those days to become non-writing days. Um,
yeah,
so my husband will sort of say, "Oh well, oh, can you just go take the car for the MOT, or oh, can you just do this, or I'll do the shopping, or I'll think, oh yeah, I'll just
yep."
put the
And then
washing
you're
out," and
like,
it just
"Yep,
goes.
yep, it
Um,
does." Like I've
yeah,
seen myself get up at 6 a.m. I'm like, right, 3 hours of writing. Nobody
yeah,
interrupt me. Just three
yeah.
hours. I never get the 3 hours.
No,
Never ever ever get the 3 hours. I have now figured out on my computer focus time.
yeah. There's
So
always
I don't get
something, isn't there?
emails. I don't get IMs. I don't get phone calls. I just set that up. I turn my phone on silent and I
Mm,
try to get in that time. And if I didn't do that, I've actually started having to do it at night as well, like
mm,
so I can continue getting that writing time in. And
yeah,
it's just driven me it's giving me the drive almost to be okay. I know what I'm doing. This is how I'm going to focus. This is how I'm going to get through it.
yeah.
Um, and if
I tried to
if
do
I
the
didn't do that,
45-minute blasts as well, turn my phone off, turn the internet off,
yep,
and just write for 45 minutes.
I
But
would do
again,
that except for I need the music to write
oh dear,
into,
oh,
and I'm like, God darn it.
I don't think I could write with music. I mean, interesting, I do tend to have, each book tends to have like a song that goes with it, almost like a theme song.
Yeah,
Um,
that's how mine is. Yeah.
but yeah, but I don't think I could actually listen to it. So I do like no, I like silence, and I'll go to the library and I'll write in the library sometimes, because
Oh,
at least then
yeah,
yeah,
those are amazing. Yeah, I
yeah,
love
and I
doing
just
that
know
too.
then I
Yeah,
won't be on the internet, and just because I find that when I'm researching something, because there's the historical aspect of it, even though
yeah,
I've got the fantasy, the history has to be grounded in it. And
yeah,
obviously my other books are straight historicals. And I can't. I'm autistic, so I can't leave things.
yeah,
I cannot just think, oh, actually, I'll come back to that later. And I'm getting much more
yeah,
disciplined at kind of making myself a note and writing like XJCK type of sword all in one word, so that I can then go look for it
yeah,
later, because otherwise I'll just flip up the internet and that'll be it, I'll gone, and 20 minutes later I won't have found the
yeah.
type of sword that somebody might have used, but I will have found lots of interesting facts about something else.
Yep, and
um
then you're like, oh, I could fit this in here, and I could fit
yeah,
that. Yep, I've
yeah,
been there. It's called the Google black hole.
yeah,
We all do it. We
yeah,
all get into the Google black hole. Yeah,
yeah.
it's very frustrating. Yeah,
And then you come up with like one detail that most people won't even notice, but you know yourself it's right. And then but I waste so much time in the day doing that. So I say I have to turn the internet off, and if I'm out of the house, that's even better. Um,
yeah,
but
and
yeah,
I think I'm learning that kind of those little tricks. Like I've been
mm,
doing it so long that almost I thought, oh, well, I'll always have that desire to write above all
mm,
else. But you have like friends and your family, and you have all these things that want to pull you away,
yeah,
and it gets very frustrating and annoying. I definitely would say,
yeah.
um,
I
and
used to.
I think
I mean, I used to be quite bad when I was starting off, and I'd have the deadlines, and I wasn't quite confident about writing to the deadline so much. I'd
yeah,
go off and write in the evening for an hour, and then my husband was saying, "Come on, this is not fair. we've got the family time, we've got kids and things. So now I'm much better at not writing in the evening.
Yeah.
Although that does mean I have to be much more focused during the day. But I think that, yeah, trying to fit around families, that is the very hard thing, not taking my laptop on holiday if we go away. Or,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
having said
that
that, I
I
will
can't
always,
do that.
there's
Yep,
always
can't do
notes
that.
on my phone. And as I say, because I've got the dictation thing, I can just
Yep.
go take the dogs for a walk and do a bit of dictation and work when nobody notices, really.
Yeah, it can be
Yeah.
annoying. Like I know for me, like the balancing element, I've never gotten right. I've
Mm.
never figured it out, and I drive people insane. Well, you survived the Book and Life podcast. That
Yes.
was
Thank you.
easy, wasn't it? It
Yeah,
wasn't
it
as
was great.
difficult or as hard as everyone thinks.
No, I
I
didn't.
hope it was.
Yeah, no,
I hope it
it's
was
lovely.
fun.
I do find it's funny because obviously I spend a lot of each day talking to kids, but actually talking
Yeah,
to adults is quite a different thing.
I know. I'm
Yeah.
with you on that. I
Mm,
literally, if there's a kid and he's like looks more interesting than the adult, I am the
mm,
person that gets down on my knees and I have a conversation with the kid. And
yeah,
my mother will be like, "The adults are up here.
yeah.
Like, would you focus?" And I'm
It's like,
like,
yeah, but we're talking about worms or something. Yeah,
"Yeah, like I'm like this more interested down here.
yeah,
Like this is more interesting." Like, and my mom just goes, "You've never grown up. You're still this like 8, 9 year old kid sometimes."
yeah,
And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because sometimes it's fun to be the adult and the grown up and do all the adult things,
yeah,
but it also is nice to kind of get down to somebody else's level and have fun and just not think about the consequences of it and
yeah,
stuff like that."
definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a pleasure having you on. I look forward to, hopefully, I can get a copy from my mom. I know she'll love the book. And I'll definitely have you back when your next one comes out next year. We'll get you all
Fantastic.
booked in and we'll have it out 2 weeks before your release next year. And we'll definitely plan ahead and have some fun. But honestly, it's been amazing having you on. I love having different authors from different worlds coming on and having detailed conversations about
Yeah.
really important things. And I think we touched on really important elements today
Mm,
that a lot of writers can take away from this and um, grow from and
yeah.
expand on. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for
Guys,
having me.
guys are going to want to check back next week. We have another female author on tonight. Or I will be talking to them tonight. You guys will be hearing it the following week, but you're definitely going to want to hear what she's got to say. And she's got a book you will be dying to enjoy. So without further ado, I shall catch you all later. And please be safe while listening to this podcast. I have to wait until it stops.